Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Meet the Agent. Joining me today is expert real estate agent Jere Becker. Jere joins us with 20 years of experience out in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area and is currently working with Real Broker. Jere, thank you so much for joining us today. How are you doing?
Thank you, Alan. I'm doing great. Appreciate it. Happy holidays to you.
Happy holidays to you as well. And so thank you thank you for setting aside the time to connect here with us, Jere, because obviously with the length of time that you've spent in the industry, I'm sure that there's a lot of nuggets of wisdom you'll be able to share with us. Before I jump into all that though, could you explain and share with us why specifically real estate of all fields?
Oh yeah, actually, previously I was a pharmacist, and then went into personal fitness training, and I liked working one-on-one with people and making a difference in their lives. And real estate was somewhat of just a natural transition, making these are purchases that people make that can actually have tremendous memories that they're going to have for a long time. And so it really does have a difference if they have an agent that knows what they're doing and helps them through this process, because sometimes it can be stressful. And then even working with investors, I'm helping them maximize their profits, and that's helping build a legacy for their family. So it has a lot of impact on people, and that's what I really love about real estate. There's a creative side to it, and there's a people side to it, right? And it's very rewarding. It's very challenging, and I just love everything about the industry.
Fantastic. And so with the amount of time that you've spent in the industry, I'm sure that you've seen a lot of different trends come and go. But I did want to delve a little bit more into, why specifically the background or the other experience that you've had is something that makes you more dangerous in real estate. Could you elaborate a little bit more for me on that?
Yeah, so like my background in pharmacy,
Hmm.
dealing with people in difficult situations, as you know, a lot of people come into a pharmacy. So having already worked with people that are trying to solve a problem or have an expectation to meet, really working with people and people helping them with their goals as a personal fitness trainer. One of their goals is to get the house and so forth. So all that really prepared me. Also being that I was, a business owner and having to run my own business and schedule and all that. And that's what it takes in real estate to be successful, is to be able to have people skills, but also, organizational skills, and to be able to work with other professionals as well and to accomplish a goal for people. So it was, a very good preparation for me to go into real estate.
Definitely, yeah. Being in that kind of consultative space, right? It's a
Exactly.
jump, kind of a lateral move, right? Because it is still talking to people about something that ideally they do, cherish, right? In, your previous work, their health, and then now in this current world, right there, where they live and, ultimately where they're going to purchase their home. Now, uh, I did want to ask to have you elaborate a little bit more. Have you been in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex the entire 20 years, or did you jump around markets at all?
No, I've been here ever since I graduated from the University of Kansas in 1989 and moved straight to Dallas, Texas. Took my first job with Eckerd Pharmacy and been here ever since. And that's helped a lot with my knowledge of the area, because I've driven to just about every little, there's all these little towns we have, little areas of Dallas Fort Worth that I had, didn't have any knowledge they even existed until you drive out these places. And we have such a great Metroplex, a lot of diversity. You got the Cowtown on the Fort Worth side, you got the Dallas, business skyline and all that. So it's a great place to live. There's a lot of what I call bedroom communities with great schools. Just an awesome place to live. We've got an airport that could take you anywhere if you want to fly. And it's just been a pleasure to grow up and live in this area.
Yeah, and especially as it becomes more and more of a hot zone, right? People have been talking about investing in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex for at least a couple of years, and it doesn't seem like there's any signs of slowing down. What trends have you noticed in your markets currently?
Yeah, so an influx of investors definitely has been the hugest probably change here. The great thing about our Metroplex is we still have a lot of land around the Metroplex, so the builders are still building, right?
Mhm.
So, and now with the effects of COVID and so on, people working from home, that's allowed people to live further out and yet still work for their companies if they need to occasionally drive into the office. But that's changed the scape of where people have to choose to live, because it usually would have to be with a certain distance or wanted to be within a certain distance of their office. And then as we get more and more populated, that causes more and more traffic, which delays people's commutes and so forth. Well, now this has changed all that. It's allowed people to, live in new homes further out on the edge of town. So I see a lot of growth here for a long time. I work with a lot of investors, an investor myself. This Metroplex sees an influx of a lot of investment money, cash and so forth to buy properties. So it's changed the industry for us as real estate agents, because now we're competing with people that are offering cash for that house. And so they don't list the property with a realtor, right? And so we're competing now. And then you've got companies like Zillow and so forth, institutional buyers that come in here buying houses. And so it's changed it's made it more challenging for the real estate brokers and agents that are trying to list properties for people. There's a lot more competition than there used to be. So people have to keep up. And then you have marketing, you have social media that's changed real estate. And so agents that come in without any marketing experience, unless you're going to pay for the marketing to be done, if you don't spend hours and hours doing that, how are you going to get leads and so forth? Because most people now go and look online. They find their agents online. They find the house first. Sometimes it's different now. They find the house first and then they go find the agent, right? So a lot of things have changed, even especially the last 10 years since we had our last recession.
Okay, interesting. And thank you for diving deep into it, Jere. I mean, one thing that I wanted to ask you, right? Because you touched on the two ways, or I mean, two of many, I'm sure, but two specific ways that information and availability of information, right? Technology advancements have been affecting the real estate process, right? Now you mentioned institutional buyers and the way that they more or less try to kind of cut out the agent, right? And we can touch on that in a moment because I do have a couple of questions for you on that. But then you did also mention the way that now with the free-flowing information, the consumer themselves kind of takes it upon themselves and gets more excited about the real estate process instead of needing to be shepherded along by the real estate agent. Now, I mean, in your mind, do you feel like that's a good change with the like you mentioned, it feels almost like putting the cart before the horse if they find the house first and then go look for the agent?
So it's just like anything that technology touches, it's going to change the industry. That type of technology taken over the industry? No, it hasn't replaced the agent. So the people wanting to do the initial search and so forth, they can still go to an agent and have that process started, or they can go look for themselves. Because, when somebody's trying to make a decision, a lot of times they don't want to be bombarded by a whole bunch of agents say, hey, work with me, work with me. They want to do a little bit out on their own. So it allows, depending on what the person's preference is and how they want to do the search, or in some cases, like I get referred to them from another client, a past client or friend, and then I start working with them right away. So everything in the industry supports everybody that has a desire to either buy, sell, or lease a home. And I think the technology has actually helped for the agents as well. Because at some point, somebody's got to let them in the house, give them there's the inspection that has to happen. There's the appraisal and the information related to the loan and all these things. So we're like the centerpiece of all of this, the insurance, the utilities, essential services, all that can come from one source, which is the real estate agent that helps these people that are buying the home to assimilate all these professionals that they're going to have to work with during the process. And we can be the center point for that. And so it's actually helped us out in streamlining a lot of that process. And also technology, obviously doing offers and contracts happens much quicker now because you can do electronic signatures. So it actually speeds up the process and people can actually buy a home quicker now than they could in the past.
Amazing. And so I guess one other question that comes to mind, right? Talking about the interplay between technology and you mentioned one at least, right? The DocuSign, the ability to e-sign from, very far away and have those documents prepared in minutes instead of needing to drive and, coordinate schedules and things like that. With the global pandemic that had occurred that we're kind of, still meandering through, right? What changes, or what would you say the biggest changes that you needed to make to your business were?
The marketing to find clients, that particularly has changed. People can leverage technology and resources like Set Schedule is a way that we're leveraging our business. It's amazing that we're paying Set Schedule to go out there and do that process for us so that we can take care of what's best for us, which is dealing with the client, right? The initial contact and dealing with the client, helping them find their house. So it's actually helped us to create more business for us because of the leverage that Set Schedule has been able to provide for us. Yeah.
Fantastic. And that's interesting to me, Jere, because one of the things that we'll hear, right, and I mean, especially coming from yourself with your experience with investors, maybe you can shed some light on this, but we do hear that, investors are a little bit more flash in the pan, especially when coming from a lead generation source, right? Maybe they'll pick up a call or two, have you set up a search for them, but it's difficult to get them to cross the bridge with you, so to speak, and actually get that to turn into a transaction. At least, from what I've heard. Does that sound about right, or has your experience been different?
My experience has been different. Depending on the experience of that investor, it has a lot to do with their ability to be able to pull the trigger. And some people are more prepared and some are not as prepared. And you can only watch so many shows that show flipping houses, and it doesn't teach you everything. Can be a lot of hidden legal issues and so forth that are related to investing. So getting the right education, having an agent that understands these nuances related to investing, because they don't buy perfect houses, right? They go and buy the ugly house. So they might be in a multiple offer situation. How do they create the best offer? And then they need to understand their business and their numbers so that they buy the property correctly and can make a profit. So for investors, I love working with investors. In a lot of cases, they're easier to work with because they know more what they want in a property and so forth. And they're not looking for the perfect property. So in some cases, it's a little easier, but then they have here, at least in Dallas-Fort Worth, there's a lot of competition as investors are buying properties. So anything on in the market, on the MLS, gets multiple offers, so it ends up being a really competitive buyers, pool for any individual property that ever hits MLS. So some of that has to be off-market type of properties and so forth. And that's where Set Schedule, of course, helps us out as well, because we can come across sellers that, want to sell their property without going to the MLS.
All right, great. And so, thank you for sharing that information, Jere. Now, with that being said, right, like you mentioned, you do prefer to work with investors. How many of the, kind of armchair investors, the ones that watch the show and they get their ideas and get excited about everything without really knowing what the process is, about how often are you able to actually get them to, understand the process and move forward? Or do they get scared away at that point?
It's probably 50-50. And it all depends on their work ethic and how they run a business. Do they have business experience? So their previous experience has a lot to do with whether they're going to move forward and actually accomplish their goal. Most investors in Dallas-Fort Worth who are getting into it, and the ones that I meet, tend to have some background or like a construction background, right? That really helps them in understanding the costs and related to fixing up a property. They always do very well. People that are very people-oriented do very well because they have to have conversations with sellers and do negotiations and those types of things. So I'd say it's probably about 50-50. About half of them do very well and half of them struggle with everything.
Okay. And so what specific advice would you give to other agents about working with investors? Because again, in my understanding, sometimes it can be difficult to feel like you're providing enough value for them to work with you long-term or, actually transact with you instead of maybe trying to go around you straight to the seller's agent, something along those lines.
I would tell agents they need to learn what are the priorities for investors, right? So it's having to do with, and there's different things that they're going to do with the property. But if I'm going to live in the property, there aren't usually multiple uses for that property. There aren't different things I'm going to do with the property. I'm going to live in it, right? But with an investor, they could lease it out. They could owner finance it out. They could flip it, fix and flip it, right? So there's multiple things. They do Airbnb now. So understanding what the goal of the investor is and helping them achieve that goal. So having knowledge about construction and the cost for construction and what's called an ARV, an after repaired value. These are things that an agent should learn. The insurance is different. right? So you need to have an insurance agent that knows how to do insurance for vacant property, vacant dwelling properties, and so forth. So there's a lot more to know. That's a special niche for the investors, and they can tell the difference between somebody that doesn't know what they're doing and somebody that actually been in the business and understands it. Especially if you've been an investor yourself and you understand the nuances of what has to happen for a deal to be profitable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great.
And get educated, in other words.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, knowledge definitely is power, especially when it comes to the real estate industry, right? And, you know, there will always be those people where, you know, if you don't have the necessary knowledge, you might get treated in a different way, right? You might shoot yourself in the foot and not realize it. And so having more knowledge is definitely always a plus. Something else that I wanted to ask Jere is, I completely forgot. Give me a second here. So you had mentioned the importance of finding the right insurance agent, right? The people that can work with vacant properties. Now, I imagine with the time that you've spent in the industry that you have kind of a Rolodex or, you know, a list of your go-to people, right, for different professions, right? Say your inspectors or your contractors or your stagers even. How is it that you're able to build out the right peer group, so to speak? How do you make sure that the people that you work with are at the same level or better than you in terms of work ethic, responsibility, and punctuality?
It's been, you know, trial and error. Some of them come as referrals from clients. I always ask for people, hey, who have you been working with that you really like to work with? Always getting referrals is probably number one. And number two is having some experience when something comes up. Hey, we need a stager. And you call a couple of stagers and then research. Like Facebook is a good place to find people that are contractors, stagers, and so forth. So getting people through that, having that good experience, and then continuing to use them over and over, especially an inspection company, is very important in the process. Good insurance agents that communicate well. And the lender, obviously, number one with people that are going to finance a property. And so we have very good resources through our companies that we associate with.
Great. And I mean, I know that you mentioned you do work mainly with investors. Do you work with, you know, first-time buyers and, you know, potentially first-time home sellers, people that they do need that extra bit of nurturing, that extra bit of, you know, mentoring? Do you work with them as well?
I do. In fact, I have a team. So we do residential and commercial properties. And I work mainly with investors, but there's people on my team that do mostly the residential retail clients. And so I love teaching agents how to be successful. And it usually starts with the retail clients, and then we incorporate into the investors because they need more information when they're working with investors. So we actually teach them all that. So I do have a team that will handle pretty much anything across the real estate spectrum.
Great. And I mean, if you don't mind me asking, about how long did it take for you to hit your stride and, you know, really establish your team? Were there any hiccups along the way as well?
Yes. So as a leader, we're always learning from the people that we mentor. So as a mentor in real estate, I learn what I do that needs improvement, and then I improve on those things, and then I attract more people to my team, and I get better. I'm always in the mode of we're always learning, right? We're always getting, as a mentor, I'm always wanting to be better and be more effective in helping these people be successful. And that's why one of the reasons I moved over to Real Broker was we grow together, no agent left behind. We want to make sure that we bring people on that we're going to be responsible for them and helping them be successful. And so it's very important for me to always be growing in myself as a person, but also in my profession.
Great. And I mean, given the fact that you've gone through that process, what advice would you give to, you know, any one individual agent that hits that point where they're too busy, right? Where they, you know, they're having too much business. I mean, it's a good problem to have, right? But it can be a problem regardless. And that's where we run into agents burning themselves out or, you know, referring business away. What would you recommend kind of the first step to scale when you are too busy as an individual agent?
Yeah, outsourcing would be the best thing to find obviously people or resources that can help with those parts of the business, like bookkeeping and those sorts of things. Transaction coordinator would be a natural progression. Having somebody do the transactions, putting the information in the MLS for listings, handling the transactions. Eventually, you're going to grow this team of people. They're going to help you grow your business. So learning that, some people haven't naturally already done that, maybe through a company or through previous business. And some people are just going to have to learn it. It's just something, if you want to continue to grow, you only have so many hours in a day, right? And as long as you're trading time for dollars, and this is one thing we talk about as investors, as long as you're trading time for dollars, you're limited because you only have so many hours in a day. So at some point, you have to put the system into place. If you think about McDonald's, and McDonald's can be run by 18-year-olds, right? Because of the system that they have. So creating these systems that are effective and to help run the business eventually gives you the time and freedom that you want to have and live the lifestyle you want to live.
Great. And I mean, kind of following along that same topic of, building out a team. And as you mentioned, you've been able to, as you expand your team, right, you get to distribute, or I guess kind of what you would call delegate, right? Certain responsibilities or certain prospect types. I mean, just certain situations, circumstances, and tasks that you might not necessarily want to work on. What was your process to be able to vet out the agents that you are working with, the ones that you entrust to bring on board to your team? How did you vet them out to begin with to make sure that they would be, cut from the same cloth and really able to represent your brand and be a part of your team?
Yeah, to me, it's personality. You're looking for the people that are excited, that are happy. I can train the right person. It's hard to take somebody with a bad attitude and then try to form them into what you want, right? We're here to help people be successful, but if they don't have the underlying like emotional stability and so forth, it's going to be difficult. If they don't really like working with people, it's going to be difficult to be able to work with them. So really, it starts with their personality, looking for the right people with the right personality that matches what we want to do. And they're actually like servant leaders. They want to be of service to other people. That's an important aspect that I look for in somebody's personality or attitudes, so that they would be a good fit for our team.
Great. And I did want to switch gears here because we're coming towards the end of our time. I did want to ask you just a couple of quick last questions, specifically regarding, mistakes, or I guess missteps that you've been able to observe in the industry. And so, firstly, with clients, right, with the consumer in the real estate transaction, the home shopper, the home seller, what mistakes do you encounter often, or do you see other people make that ultimately kind of act against their best interests?
You're talking about clients, or you're talking about agents?
Clients.
Clients. In some cases, they not understanding the market. So it's our job, obviously, to educate them. And in some cases, when we have multiple offer situations and so forth, unfortunately, there are people that are willing to offer cash above a listing price and so forth. And so it makes it difficult for like a first-time home buyer, FHA buyer, in a lot of situations to try to outbid anybody with cash that's bidding more than, has all this extra cash to bid more than what the list price is. So getting them to understand that up front, sometimes it takes a little bit longer to find the house that fits them. And sometimes we just have to kind of shift as we're in the process of looking for homes. And I had a client last year that happened. We eventually found her a townhome. Originally, we were looking for a single family home. And we eventually got her into a townhome, which she still loved and still had a yard, but it wasn't the first thing that she was interested in. So sometimes it's for the client to have to really understand what they can do in this particular, especially Dallas-Fort Worth. It may not be the same in all markets, but in this market it can be very competitive, and they need to understand that. Some people may just need to wait. Their credit's not good enough. Are they willing to take another year so they can get qualified in conventional or some other program that would actually help them make better bids and save more money? So the more qualified, the stronger they are as a buyer, the more likely they're going to be able to find a home. So just getting them to understand that it's frustrating, and it can be difficult when people are having to face those circumstances, right? And but they want a home today, and it's just difficult to get that.
Yeah. Actually, that's something that I'm very interested in, and maybe you can weigh in on it a little bit. That process, right? Once you, as a real estate shopper, right, you get excited, you get stars in your eyes because you're thinking, okay, I want to, buy a home, for the first time. Maybe it's even,
Mm-hmm.
something that you're doing for the first time in your own family, right? But when you encounter the reality, right, that there is going to be homework, there's going to be, raising your credit score, talking to the lender, finding the right property, doing the MLS searches, it can be a lot, and it can be, kind of dissuading. What practices do you and your team have in place, the processes, as you'd mentioned previously, to make sure that when you have those prospects, that they don't fall off along the way just because the lender forgot to follow up, or they didn't send in their paperwork? How do we avoid that break in communication?
As agents, we end up being, counselors and mentors, and helping people along the way. We're their emotional coach and support, to help them through the process. And what's important is that the positivity, the positive attitude that we're going to find you a home. Like I had a client, it took almost a year to help her find a home, and she understood. Like, she was one of the ones that really knew that the process could take a little while, and she was patient. But it was just really staying positive with her and her daughter, actually, that were buying the home. So I think that's probably one of the best things is give them reality, but also give them positivity that it can happen. And sure enough, she wasn't the first offer. The first offer fell through, and they came to her because she had the second best offer. And sure enough, she got the property. So I was just saying, hang in there. And we've had that with a couple of clients where they weren't the winning bid, but eventually they got the property because the first one terminated. So just keeping positivity, they tend to uh, feed off of us and our energy as agents. And if we're negative and give up, then it's likely that they're going to give up as well.
Okay. Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, again, acting as a mentor, acting as the shepherd almost, right? Letting them
Yes.
know this is something that works. This is something that I've done before, and as long as you put in the work, right? You put in you call me back, you stay in contact with me, we'll be able to make it happen. Which is amazing. And so, I guess I do want to switch gears a little bit here, asking you probably what'll be my last question. On the same topic of mistakes or missteps, and I know that we have talked about at least a couple, right? But for real estate agents, what do you think that the biggest, I guess, mistake or the biggest issues that are at play right now? What is it that you see from those agents that ultimately, don't stick around in the industry for too long?
Their expectation. I had a gentleman who was my office manager. He said, when you get into real estate, you need two things that are working: a working pen and a working spouse. So I don't think people understand the money involved in getting started in real estate. Yes, can you make a significant amount of money and be successful? Yes, but it's also a business. You got to treat it like a business. It's not a hobby. And there's marketing involved. At some point, there's got to be leads coming in. And again, that's why one of the reasons I, leverage everything with Set Schedule. It just makes it a lot easier for my business to create more success for my agents, because I get to share that with my agents. And then I think it's being like what we call a one trick pony, where they are relying on one income. And it's what we call transactional income, right? So with our team, we have probably 7 different ways that we can make income as an agent. And so if you're just relying on one, you're only getting paid one way, then you're not going to be as successful. Whereas we have multiple ways that our agents can actually get paid, and that helps keep them and fills the gap between the transactions. We have ways that we can get agents paid between transactions that also keeps them in the game and gets them the income. Because the worst thing for an agent is, hey, I have to close this because I got to make my mortgage payment, or I got to make my rent payment, or I got to make my car payment. And when agents get that and they get stressed, and then that flows out to their clients, it's not very good for them. So we want to take that stress off of them, make sure they understand that they can make money multiple ways in real estate.
Fantastic. Yeah. And I mean, like you mentioned, that having that knowledge, having that comfortability really does let you focus on your clients, focus on the feeling and the interactions that they have, right? Because I think there's a great quote that says, people ultimately, they won't necessarily remember what you tell them, but they will remember how they feel after they interact with you.
Exactly. Good point.
And so thank you so much, Jere, for setting aside this time. It's been an absolute pleasure getting to speak with you and pick your brain. Before we sign off here, do you have any last notes, say, for any potential clients that are watching this out in the Dallas-Fort Worth metro area?
Yes, success comes when we don't make excuses. So I think as we grow up, sometimes we're allowed to make excuses on why we're not successful, why we didn't accomplish something. And it's to set aside excuses and just go for what you desire. Set forth, know that it's going to happen, and just have the faith that everything will fall into place when it needs to in order for your goal or your dream or whatever you're trying to achieve can happen for you. So just keep the faith and be blessed.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Jere. It's been an absolute pleasure. And for our viewers and listeners, thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of Meet the Agent. Don't forget to like and subscribe our content, follow our social media pages, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Thanks again.